of the Penny Foundation. We're excited. We are excited that you have decided to join us on this morning as we celebrate Ujamaa. Um, we are in this season of Kwanzaa, and as we know that Ujamaa is the um, just the fourth principle, and it's also cooperative economics, and this essentially means the commitment of the practice of shared social wealth and to do the work that's necessary to achieve it. It stresses self-reliance in the building, strengthening, and controlling of our own economic community. So there's assumption here that we must seize and maintain this initiative, and that we have the ability and power to do that as well. And so I welcome you this morning to this great conversation. A little bit about the Penny Foundation for those who might not have engaged with us before. We are 3 years old. We're a community chest located in Birmingham, Alabama. Now, our focus is eliminating economic inequality in the Black community. And one of the major initiatives that we're working on is coordinating and organizing community-owned grocery stores. We believe that if communities that have been distressed, Black communities, control the groceries that come through their communities, then you can use the grocery money as a way to to sustain and revitalize communities. And so again, thank you. I want to thank our panelists for joining us. We have a great group of panelists that I will give a brief introduction, and then each one of the panelists will have a chance to talk a little more about themselves in their particular space, in particular how it relates to cooperative economics, and then we'll have a round of questions that we can take from the audience. So first up, Roy S. Johnson. He's a journalist, entrepreneur, and media consultant. Roy is an award-winning journalist, digital content strategist, life coach, and wellness consultant. He is a statewide columnist for AL.com. He's also the CEO and founder of Fit, Live, Win, which provides life and wellness coaching to empower and motivate clients to lead healthy, fulfilling lives, manage stress, and to achieve their goals and their dreams. He's a motivational speaker on subjects of media, communications, race, culture, sports, fitness, wellness, and success. And so we welcome Roy S. Johnson.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Next up is Pascal Cooper. She's the director of the Alabama and the Black Belt. She assumed this role retiring as vice president of institutional served as
Still can't hear you. Can't hear you. Lord, I could not hear you. So, Lord, your mic is muted.
What about now?
I can hear you now. I didn't hear any of your introductions after you
Welcome back,
Roy.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I didn't hear any introductions after mine. Did anybody?
I didn't either.
Right. So you need to introduce everybody except me again, Lord.
Wow. So, I apologize for that. Technology works until it doesn't, right?
Yep.
I still don't hear you.
Okay. So let me go back. After Roy, I introduced Ms. Cooper, and so Priscilla Hancock Cooper. She's director of the Alabama African American Civil Rights Heritage Sites Consortium. That's a collaboration of 20 civil rights sites in Montgomery, Birmingham, Selma, and the Black Belt. And so she assumed this role after retiring as vice president of institutional programs at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute in 2017. She also served as the president and CEO from 2014 to 2015. She's received the Museum Service Award from the Southeastern Museum Conference, and her essay about the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute was published in the Public Journal of History. And so, introduce to you, Ms. Hancock Cooper.
Good morning, everyone. How about Organi?
All right. Our next panelist, Dr. Lonnie Hannon. Dr. Hannon is an experienced researcher and educator of economic factors associated with neighborhood disadvantage, affordable and low-income housing, and health disparities. His specific areas of study include the effects of legacy-based housing policy on neighborhood development and community empowerment. He receives over $1 million in grants to funding to stimulate community engagement in the Alabama Black Belt. He serves on the Birmingham Land Bank Authority Board of Directors and lives in Birmingham with his wife, Kimberly, and 2 children. Dr. Hannon.
Thank you. And it's my honor to be among such esteemed people today. And I'm proud to be able to contribute.
And our last panelist, Pamela Madzima. She is based at the Rural Training Center in Epps, Alabama. Pamela has worked with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives for 16 years in technical assistance and support to member cooperatives of the Federation and the Alabama State Association of Cooperatives. The primary responsibilities include directing and coordinating outreach and technical assistance programs to member cooperatives and providing assistance in forming new cooperatives. So we welcome Pamela.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
All right. So, good morning. All right. Apologize for that technical snafu. I think we're back on track now, and I look forward to this conversation as well. So, I think it's a perfect opportunity as we think about this time that we're celebrating Kwanzaa. I think it's a great time to talk about, what does this mean as far as cooperative economics in the space of Kwanzaa? And so, Ms. Cooper, if you would just kind of give us a background of what Kwanzaa is, and then kind of frame cooperative economics within Kwanzaa.
Okay, I'll give it a shot, Lloyd. Kwanzaa means first fruits, and it was organized by Malana Ron-Karenga in 1966. And if you just think about what was happening in the 60s, this was at the height of the civil rights movement, the height of the Black Power movement, and a reawakening of racial consciousness in the African American community. And so Kwanzaa is a cultural holiday. It's an opportunity for us to reflect on our history, contributions of African Americans, and Africans across the diaspora, and to use that history as inspiration for moving forward. It's celebrated for 7 days from December 26th through January 1st. Each day, there's a specific principle that's uplifted, and I don't know which way to scoot so you can see my Kanara, but there's 7 candles and 7 symbols that are part of Kwanzaa. And it is not a traditional African holiday. It was inspired by African harvest festivals. The language that is used is Kiswahili, which is spoken in Eastern Africa, and at one time was considered as the potential lingua franca or common language for the continent. It is not a religious holiday, so it is not a Black Christmas. And it is an opportunity for reflection. And I think in talking about cooperative economics, the way Malana Karinga defined it was to build and maintain our own shops, stores, and other businesses and profit together from them. Of course, the economy has changed tremendously since 1966, but I think that underlying value and principle is still very much relevant.
Yeah, so thank you for that overview. Dr. Hannon, as we think about this whole notion of cooperative economics, how did cooperative economics, I guess, throughout the history of Black people, how has that looked, or how has cooperative economics impacted Black communities in the past?
So thank you, Lord, for again inviting me here. When we think about cooperative economics in the past and how it's impacted the Black community, like our whole survival as a community really depended on us bonding together and us really relying very largely on ourselves. There was no U.S. institution that had our well-being in mind. So, after slavery, we began to form these penny organizations. We began to form these mutual savings organizations. And from there, we began to build our own institutions. Tuskegee University is an example of one of those institutions. So we buried our dead. We sent our children to school. We did so many things just using this concept of cooperative economics that allow our people to really make it through some really, really difficult times. And so when we think about the legacy of Booker T. Washington, we think about the lessons that we learned. Like, I'm from Birmingham, and so I grew up under the philosophy of A.G. Gaston and so many other people who taught us really about self-reliance. And so the history of cooperative economics in our community is the history of our survival as a people, because for so long we couldn't rely on U.S. institutions like the government or any other large institution to provide for our well-being. We had to take care of ourselves.
So really, to follow up on that, on that thought, right? So I've listened to Roy talk before about Roy from Tulsa, and so wealth of knowledge through his research, through his writings, what have you. But Roy, you think about Tulsa and what happened there. Going back, could, could Black Wall Street have ever existed without cooperative economics?
I didn't quite hear everything you said, Lord. You were breaking up a little bit, but I think you brought up Black Wall Street, mentioned that I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, am just old enough to remember the last days of Black Wall Street. For those of you who are not familiar with it, between really the start of the 20th century and through the 60s, one of the greatest examples of cooperative economics in the Black community existed in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in part because of the migration of African Americans, ex-slaves moving west, finding and running into people of color there, Native Americans. And as we learned, at least I learned earlier this year in doing some family research, some of those African Americans were enslaved by Native Americans. But it resulted in communities being built up, all Black towns in what was then Indian Territory and later became the state of Oklahoma. Towns like Boley, Oklahoma, which remained pretty much all African American, and then in places like Tulsa, where African Americans were segregated. The term "the other side of the tracks" was really born in Tulsa because literally they were building the railroad, and they told Blacks that they could only they could own land, they could build whatever they needed to survive on the other side of the tracks, and that's exactly what happened. So by the 1920s, there were over 200 Black-owned businesses operating on the other side of the tracks in Tulsa, including everything from grocery stores, movie theaters, transportation systems, even. So it was forced cooperative economics, forced by segregation, and it thrived for decades. It even was revived after what we are going to commemorate the 100th anniversary of next year, and that is the 1921 Race Massacre, in which North Tulsa, the African American part of Tulsa, was essentially burned down, and up to 300 African Americans were massacred, were murdered by whites in that city. Bombs were dropped by the government, burning down establishments, and establishments that were never compensated for their losses. Insurance companies refused to pay. So when you talk about the disparities, economic disparities, when you talk about disparities of wealth, not just between African Americans and whites, but even among African Americans, you have to look at incidents like this that wiped out a generation of wealth for dozens of families that had viable, solid businesses. And some of those families have never recovered. As we mostly know, I mean, pockets like this existed in Birmingham, they existed in New York, they existed in cities like Charlotte. So cities throughout the South had their own versions of Black Wall Street. And without getting into a long history and a discussion about why they disappeared, essentially once we were given the opportunity to begin taking our dollars and shopping elsewhere, rather than valuing, at least this is just my opinion, rather than valuing what we had, the products that we had built, the enterprises that we had built, we were so eager to shop and to share our dollars at places that weeks before either would not allow us in, would treat us with such disdain that, for instance, in Tulsa, women had to put tissues in their hats to try hats on in stores downtown, and yet many of them still went shopping down there. But because we were so eager to take our dollars outside of the community, we looked up 20 years later, and places like my father's store. My father owned a drugstore on Greenwood that was one of the last stores standing in what was known as Black Wall Street. Those stores all disappeared. Now there's almost nothing of the original enterprises. There's one church, was the church I grew up in, Vernon AME, is still on Greenwood. But an area that was born of segregation, that thrived during segregation, is part of what Ms. Cooper talked about in terms of economics changing. The economics have changed, but the opportunities have not, and I think that's partly what we're here to discuss.
Yeah. So this whole notion of forced economics, I want to put a pin in that because I want to definitely come back to that in the discussion. So Pamela, so we're talking about cooperative economics, but I want to be able to move from this theoretical conversation around cooperative economics and working together to a more practical one. And so, can you kind of just share with us what are cooperatives, right? And what impact can they play in communities and alleviating these economic inequalities?
Okay, thank you so much again, Lloyd, for this opportunity to be here today. One of the things that the Federation does on a day-to-day basis is to help start, organize cooperative businesses, which are democratically owned businesses where people come together because they have a common need and they realize that they cannot meet this need if they act alone. So I like to just share a quick history of the Federation. The Federation was started by 22 cooperatives and credit unions in the 1960s that came together during the civil rights movement. They were forced again to work together because farmers were being discriminated against and were not receiving access to fair prices and fair markets. Um, the sharecropping community was being displaced when they chose to register to vote and other things. So 22 cooperatives and credit unions came together to form this technical assistance arm, which is the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, to help strengthen and build the cooperative businesses that were forming all across the Southeast. And so out of these 22 cooperatives, the Federation has been able to grow to have 75 cooperatives and credit union members. And we constantly work to be able to organize groups of people who feel that they have a need, either it may be for fair wages and employment. We assist them in starting worker-owned cooperatives, or farmers who, again, still need access to better markets and better pricing for their commodities. We help them to organize ag cooperatives. So basically, a cooperative is a business that groups of people come together to start. And as a business, it is governed by a set of principles. And there are 7 principles of cooperatives, which are open and voluntary membership, democratic control, which distinguishes co-ops from other types of businesses. It's governed by a one member, one vote principle. The third principle of co-ops is cooperative member economic participation. So any person that joins a cooperative is their right and responsibilities to make sure that they patronize the business, but they also invest in the cooperative. A fourth principle of cooperatives is autonomy and independence. As a business, cooperatives engage in business contracts with other types of entities, and they remain their autonomy and independence. The fifth principle of cooperatives is constant education. So a cooperative is a business model that's not well known. So therefore, the groups of people that come together to organize a co-op need to continue to educate themselves on what this business entity is to ensure success. Then the sixth principle of cooperatives is cooperation among cooperatives. So cooperatives can be started in any type of industry, from consumer-owned grocery co-ops to financial cooperatives such as credit unions to rural electric co-ops to farmer cooperatives. So within the cooperative community, cooperatives share similar principles and values, and so engage in business collectively. And then the final principle of cooperatives, which is concern for communities. Co-ops are started by groups of people that live in a community and have started this business, again, to meet their own personal need, but to also ensure that the community that they live in and work in is able to thrive and support their co-op businesses.
All right. So, just listening, and can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good. And so, in listening to everyone, one of the things that has really stood out is that whether it's forced cooperation, cooperative economics has always been a part of our heritage, and it's allowed us to get to where we're at on today. And so that takes me to my next question, and for anybody to answer is, how do we go from just celebrating, cooperative economics, celebrating Ujamaa, to practically applying it in our everyday lives?
I could just start off by saying, basically understanding again the history and the role of co-ops, and educating people on the benefits of people working together in cooperatives. One of the things we find in our formal educational system, people really talk about cooperative enterprises as an alternative business structure. And so ensuring that our schooling programs and our business classes teach about cooperatives as an alternative business structure is one way in which the cooperative movement can expand and grow. And again, one of the things I like to share with people are some examples of successful cooperatives, such as Organic Valley and the Land O'Lakes and Sunkist. When I talk to people about that, they say, "Oh, I had no idea that was a cooperative." And so just educating community members about the cooperative advantage and the cooperative business is one way in which we can expand and grow co-op businesses in our communities.
Yeah, the importance of the educational component, and reminding people not just what cooperatives are, but their role in our history, and then presenting opportunities to groups of people to replicate that today. I also think there's another opportunity that is born of this notion that the economics have changed, that we do now have national and global opportunities to build new types of cooperatives, to invest with each other, to invest in each other, to build maybe what's not a traditional cooperative, but one that still is based on the principle of supporting each other, of creating products that fill a need, as Dr. Hannon mentioned about the A.G. Gaston, find a need, fill a need. Supporting those products, supporting those ventures, even if they're not local, and the opportunity now, with innovation, with the digital economy, is there to create the digital cooperatives that fulfill the same needs as traditional cooperatives, but do so on a national and global scale. So I think it's important for us to educate ourselves and each other about the notion of cooperatives, take whatever opportunities we can to create cooperatives at a local level, whether they are business enterprises, educational enterprises, anything that support and uplift our community, as well as taking advantage of the technologies and the opportunities to create global cooperatives, to engage with people outside our geographic communities, to create the kind of products and services that still fill a need, and do so in a way that supports the historic notion of cooperatives, and does it on a new scale.
Right. And if I can just, chime in. So I don't think a lot of people realize that the Green Bay Packers is a cooperative. Yeah. And, I'm a big NFL fan. My sons and I, we watch football. And if you look at Green Bay, it's the smallest sports market in all of the three major sports in the United States. And the Packers are cooperatively owned by the residents of Green Bay. And so I say that to say, Lord, that if we need some buy-in by the city of Birmingham, and just to support the effort, especially from the ground up. And then I think really what it takes is just a higher level of social integration and cohesiveness among the people. And I think that can come from our use of digital technology. So right now there's this huge push on social media to get us to take the vaccine, right? And so it's what we're seeing is that, believe it or not, vaccine acceptance is slowly getting more and it's growing, right? And if we're able to get government buy-in from the city of Birmingham on the local level, okay, on the local level, because on the local level we're largely in charge, and then also use the digital technology to build trust within our community and trust in each other. And I think that one of the issues that we face is that we have to learn how to love and trust each other a little bit more, because that's going to be fundamental in supporting the cooperative. And then I think we have to build a competent leadership structure where the people are involved democratically. And I think that we could, that's how you build a successful cooperative, especially when we're talking about groceries, when we're talking about food. A&P Grocery was started as a cooperative, and A&P used to be the largest grocer in the United States. And so it's definitely possible. I think we have to wrap our brain around it. I think we have to have local buy-in from the local government. And I think we also have to have higher levels of social integration and trust.
Okay, thank you. As I was sitting here, I was thinking about how the work that I'm currently doing ties into the question or issue of cooperative economics. And Lonnie touched on something that's very important, is trust. The Alabama African American Civil Rights Heritage Sites Consortium, and that's a long name, is a collaborative. And its mission and purpose is to build capacity for these historic places to be sustainable long term. And about 75% of them are churches that have a long history of being that economic engine, that social engine in their communities. As with many of our institutions, as was mentioned, that vitality faded. And I do want to refer to the impact of the interstate highway system and urban renewal in the 50s and 60s on the health of our communities and its impact on Black businesses and Black neighborhoods. But building trust is key, and it has been an honor and exciting opportunity to work with people in very different regions of the state, and providing access. And historic preservation is one of those fields, like many others, where African Americans are just beginning to be recognized and our history celebrated. But the other side of that is, particularly in Alabama, with the civil rights movement, there are a lot of tourism is an entrepreneurial enterprise. It is a business, and tour leaders, the tourism industry has been benefiting by bringing people into our communities to learn about our history, but the people who created that history have not necessarily benefited. So that's one of the challenges that we're facing and dealing with, is how do we assure that these places and people that created this history that now everybody, wants to come in and learn about and walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and look at 16th Street Baptist Church, how does our community begin to benefit from that? And it does take a cooperative effort and a collaborative effort, and building that. And Pamela, I'm really want to have some conversation with you offline about that cooperative model, as it might be applied to a nonprofit operating as we are. But the opportunities, as you say, Roy, are great. and it is seeing the need. And I have to admit that this was a need that I didn't necessarily recognize until we became involved in this process, and then attempting to fill it by working together toward common goals. And it's work. That's the other piece of it. It's work. It doesn't immediately fall into place. And I always say celebrate small victories as you're moving forward and keeping your eye on the long-term goal, which is building something that will outlast us.
So one of the things I've heard, I believe I've heard each one of you talk about is trust, right? From whether it's when Black people had a chance to go somewhere else, they did, to all that's happened between then and now. So let me give background to my question. So I'm looking at research in different places about cooperatives, and it's just not nationally; it's really internationally. So I come across Finland, and I see in Finland that I think more than 90%, at least 85% of the population, everybody has at least one share in a cooperative. 50% of them have more than one, right? And so it's a whole economy, and it all depends and starts with people. So how do we build the trust then amongst people to begin to build that type of economy?
I don't mind starting. One is transparency, being honest about what you're doing, being willing to share information, not being afraid to share information. And the other is to do what you say. Don't build unrealistic expectations and disappoint everybody. Remind people along the way of what you're working toward and what you said you're able to do. Explain why your capacity may be limited, or why you're moving in a certain direction. But I would say, and people know when you're sincere. We can read when people are really working toward the goal that they claim, and are willing. And we just had some T-shirts made that say "Plan with, not for." To trust the people you're working with, to hear their input, to incorporate what they have to say whenever you can. Those are, I guess, three: transparency, planning with, not for, doing what you say. Are three things that I would say are very important in building that trust.
I liken that trust path to also encouraging and guiding someone along the wellness path. One thing you mentioned, Priscilla, was setting realistic goals. I've often run into people that say, well, I want to lose 50 pounds. Well, let's start out talking about losing 5 and celebrating when you lose that 5 and building towards the next 5. Because along that path to trying to lose 50, you're going to gain some weight along the way and you're going to stumble. Not every cooperative is this magical entity that operates perfectly from the beginning. And another element of that trust is ensuring that you have quality people on your team. If you are trying to lose weight, if you are trying to eat well, you're going to entrust that journey to a qualified trainer, someone who you trust with your body. You're going to entrust your eating habits with a qualified dietitian, with somebody that you entrust with your eating habits. In the cooperative, and I covered sports for many years as a journalist, winning teams are built around talent and trust. So if we talk about setting realistic goals, small goals with small groups of people, and then being transparent about that success, celebrating that success, success breeds other success. Trust breeds more trust. And I think sometimes in setting our goals too big, that we end up diluting the talent. We end up having people on the team that maybe aren't totally as trustworthy, and so the trust can break down. So it is important to have quality people on the team to build towards achievable goals, celebrate those goals, and then to showcase that to the community, to where somebody says, wow, that worked over there. Those 5 people got together, or those 10 people got together and created something. Now let's add another 15 to that and build on that. So again, starting with quality teammates, quality members of the cooperative, demonstrating achievable goals, achieving those goals, and then sharing, celebrating that success with the rest of the community.
Wow. Great feedback. Any others? And also, let me go ahead and point out too, if there anybody who's listening, if you have a question, feel free to put it into the chat, and we'll make sure that we'll try to get it answered for you. So any other follows about trust?
Yeah, I think Dr. Hancock Cooper and Mr. Johnson nailed it. I mean, you have to deliver. You have to deliver on what you say you're going to deliver on, and you have to be transparent. Dr. Hancock Cooper may remember, our time at Epic, like years ago, Epic Elementary. And I remember going to the PTA meetings as a child, and those meetings were packed. I mean, and they were full. Everybody was there, and the parents were there was 100% buy-in. And like what Mr. Johnson said, you had quality people on the team who had a vision and a goal, and they were unified around that vision and goal. And there was transparency, and then you have to deliver on the results. And I love the idea of starting small, delivering, and showing everyone else, hey, this is really possible. Look at what happened over here. And so I agree 100% with Mr. Johnson and Dr. Hancock Cooper. I think that is the blueprint for how to achieve this.
So another piece to that, I think, are expectations, right? So Pamela, can you share with us like myths about cooperatives? Common myths that need to be highlighted and shot down?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I was a few years ago, we went to Uniontown, Alabama to try to organize cooperatives, and the people that invited us to Uniontown warned us that we want to start a cooperative. We know we want to start a co-op, but we don't really know if we want to use the word cooperative business as we begin to organize people. And one of the things we find is that, people have a mistrust of co-ops. They've seen a lot of cooperatives that have started and failed, and just not really understanding what a cooperative is. So one of the things that we do when we're organizing cooperatives is to really stress the difference between a cooperative and an individually owned business, and that you're really coming together to organize this cooperative business, because you have this need that you cannot achieve if you act alone. And so you're pulling in other people with similar needs and similar goals to be able to achieve this common goal. Most of the time, of course, it may be a social need, but really we're looking at economic needs to advance yourself and the community. And so when people begin to understand that a cooperative, again, is a business, you're starting it because you have a common need, you need other people to join you in starting this business, then we go into what are the principles of co-ops. And one of the principles is democratic member control. So if you choose to join this cooperative entity, you have a one member, one vote, and you have to exercise your vote in the meeting to ensure that your voice is heard. And we find that a lot of cooperatives end up falling apart and disbanding when people do not exercise their control within a meeting and they leave a meeting with an idea or something that they wanted to share, and they meet outside of that meeting, and that can quickly pull apart a cooperative. So there's so many things that cause people to distrust cooperative businesses, and it really starts with a strong foundation of people remembering that we're coming together because we want to achieve something that we can't achieve on our own.
So I'm just curious, Pamela, what transpired with that cooperative that was initially discussed? Was it in Uniontown? I can't quite remember the city. And are there examples of successful ones that can be highlighted, that can be built upon, that can be utilized in order to begin to establish some of that trust in others that may be more leery about cooperative?
Yeah, absolutely. So the cooperative in Uniontown, we spent a whole year trying to organize, and I think the individualistic mindset sort of prevented that cooperative business from starting. It was going to be a composting business, and I think one family felt that they had invested a lot of time and money into this business idea and did not feel that they wanted to work with others. But I don't think it was a total failure. We were able to introduce a different business model, and I believe, down the line there are going to be different cooperatives that are going to come out of that. But within the federation, we have cooperatives such as the Freedom Quilting Bee Cooperative, which was an initial co-op member of the federation that was started in the 1960s. In 2012, it became dormant because of just market issues. The the quilting industry, we were now competing with China, and they just could not compete. And so that co-op became dormant. But in recent years, we're now organizing the Freedom Quilting Bee Legacy, which was started by a group of women, again, in Wilcox County, who are trying to come together to figure out how they can continue the legacy of co-ops. So, other examples of successful cooperatives are the Federation of Greene County Employee Federal Credit Union, which is in Utah, Alabama. That is a member of the Federation that has existed since 1975. When I attend the meetings of the credit union, there are certain things that the credit union does that I think continues to keep them surviving. One, they have strong governance. They follow the co-op principles. They have an effective board, as we mentioned earlier on, an effective leadership team. They understand the reason and need why they started as a cooperative. And I guess to just end my statement, I think one of the things that we stress again is that a co-op is a business. In the very beginning, do your business planning, conduct your feasibility study. Try not to take those shortcuts, and that again will ensure that you're able to survive as a business.
Good deal. So we're coming up on the hour, and one of the things I want to make sure that we have a chance to do is for everyone to have, I guess, their final thoughts, in particular around, for the people who are listening, for the people who will listen to this in the future. What is the challenge? What is the challenge that you want to make to the audience out there? And I give you a chance to think about it. I think for myself, when I look at kind of how the Penny Foundation was started. So the Penny Foundation was started, it partly paid homage to the Penny Savings Bank. And so it's one of those, those penny entities that Dr. Hannon talked about, which was built off the model of Booker T. Washington. And so when I look at the foundation taking, everybody might not have a lot of money, but a lot of people with a little bit of money pooling their resources together, then being strategic about how it's reinvested in communities, right? I think that's cooperative in essence. We don't say cooperative, but the more I learned about cooperative, I realized that's cooperative. Being a Black Baptist preacher, you talking about those meetings in the meetings and those meetings outside of the meetings. Yes. The more I think about the structure of the church is cooperative. So it's me working, and at least my position, my thought, I'm working backwards and seeing how cooperative economics plays into into multiple aspects of my life that I never thought about until I actually started thinking through and thinking down this line. And so that's what I encourage people to do. Not just with this, but with Kwanzaa in general. These principles are not just made to celebrate for 1 week of the year. They're meant to be lived throughout the entire year. And so how do you begin to make this a part of your regular, everyday conversation, essence, and being? And so with that, so we're going to have final thoughts and final challenge. I think Dr. Hannon will start with you. What is that you're going to challenge people to do coming away from this conversation?
Well, I want to challenge people to look at, their fellow brother and sister as a team player. I would challenge us as a people to really think about the importance of trust and unification. And in that, we can get whatever we want. I was interviewed by The Atlantic some years ago, and we talked about grocery stores coming to poor communities. Our grocery stores, especially Publix and Winn-Dixie, those type of stores, they have a profit motive, and they do these very intricate demographic studies, and they look at income and household finance and things of that nature before they make a decision. What I'm saying is that we don't have to rely on that model per se. I mean, we can build our own grocery stores, and we can put those grocery stores in our community if we are unified around a common vision. And so I want to challenge all of us as a people to unify around the goals that we set democratically as a people.
Very good. Very good. Ms. Cooper, what do you want to challenge us to do?
I think my challenge is for us to believe in our ability and our responsibility to create better. One of the values of really studying our history is that we see and have lessons from all sorts of people who believed in and had hope for better and put that belief into action. In the church, we say faith without works is dead. So putting that belief into action, recognize when you're buying into negative stereotypes, racial stereotypes, we call it internalized oppression. We still have much work to do so that we aren't buying into and perpetuating negative images of ourselves. And then really based on knowing our history and knowing that wonderful legacy that we have of people moving forward, of people making progress, of people helping each other, that we believe in our ability to do the same.
Thank you. Thank you. Pamela?
I think it's an exciting time to learn about cooperatives and organized co-ops. So I think my last parting words would be, to think big, think globally, look at the examples of successful cooperatives, and let's work to organize cooperatives, whether it's worker-owned cooperatives, people that are underemployed, unemployed, that are trying to start businesses. You can start a business with 5 other people. The grocery-owned, community-owned grocery co-ops, and those that type of things. I think it's a really exciting time with technology and other things that people did not have years ago that we can utilize. And I think really understanding and learning our history and seeing how people came together to achieve their own economic welfare, and they were able to do this in difficult times, should challenge us to be able to do it now.
Yeah. It's definitely time to do your homework and then prepare, plan, and launch something. That's for sure. Brother Johnson, what do you have for us?
Well, I'll try to wrap it up with this. I concur and embrace all of the challenges that were put forth by my fellow panelists, and I'm honored to be able to share this platform with them. But let me add this challenge. To me, cooperative economics begins at home. I think everyone in our community could attend a financial boot camp to understand the principles of saving, to understand the principles of investing, to understand the and embrace the discipline necessary to create the kind of individual wealth and resources that then allows us to take maybe the kinds of risks that we must take in order to partner with others to build new enterprises, whether they are small local cooperatives or to invest our money together to create a larger enterprise and to be part of something larger. But to me, the challenge that I want to put out is for us to go back to Finances 101, to look at cooperative economics as a personal challenge, a personal endeavor. I challenge my own kids to challenge them since they began to get allowances to save part of that, to understand what investing is, and when they got a little bit more, to invest in something bigger. This is something that they've heard from the earliest years of their lives, to associate with others who also have that discipline and who have that vision to think beyond just the dollars that you have on your own, and how you can benefit by sharing that with others. So I think that combine all the things we heard today, embrace the challenge of looking at cooperative economics and starting at home. I think we give ourselves a real opportunity to recreate in a different way the Black Wall Street that we talked about earlier, create a vision for a place for us in our community where we support each other, we invest in each other, we cooperate with each other, and ultimately create the kind of community that I think we all envision and don't want to let go of. And I still, as selfish as we are, have the opportunity to recreate.
Well, again, I thank you all for your time. I thank you all for sharing your thoughts and talents with us on today. One of the things I love about being able to create this type of platform is I'm hoping that as with this conversation that amongst the panelists there's collaboration and overlap because interests are there as well. Let me end by just saying this. I've been working on this model, cooperative economics and community owned grocery store for about a year now. And when I started by looking for a location. But the more I learned about cooperatives and how to make a strong cooperative, it doesn't start with a location. It doesn't start with a building. It starts with people. So when people decide they want to come together and to do something, then it will happen. And I can tell you just from my research that if there are people who want to come together and put the grocery store in their own community, the resources, the monetary resources are out there. We just have to organize ourselves. I have talked with funds who will the monetary resources, however much it might cost, whether it's 8 million, 10 million, that type of money out there to support organizing cooperatives. We just have to organize ourselves. So that's my challenge. And that's also my commitment is to stay at working on organizing people around this idea of working together for a common cause, so that we can solve not just the food as the issue, but the economic issue. Because if we solve the economic issues, then food won't be an issue. Health disparities won't be an issue. We might have other problems, but we won't have those problems. Right. So you can learn more about the Penny Foundation, learn more about what we're doing with the grocery store concept. You can visit www.pennyfoundation.org, and under programs, you can go to community-owned grocery stores. You can see the website and our survey if you're interested in having a grocery store in your community or think you'll be interested in. Feel free to fill out the survey. Feel free to contact us. If you want to support the Penny Foundation, again, go to www.pennyfoundation.org. Click on the donate button, and you'll see a list of the foundation and what we're doing and ways to support. So again, I'll leave you with how I leave most of the meetings when I'm talking with my board, when I'm talking with people. So we might not have a lot, but everybody has something to give. If we all put it and pool our resources together, again, we can sustain and build whatever it is that we want to. So I hope you all have a great rest of the year. Thank you again for joining the Penny Foundation in this conversation about cooperative economics and in Jumba. And so I end by, I'm still has recently taught me by
Bye-bye.
Harambe.
Harambe.
Bye-bye.